so dangerous.
Yeah, and right now it doesn't seem, well, see, this is the part that gets
Right.
tricky, right? Because then you have traffic in intersections, and this car is slowing down, so luckily we're right around 15 miles an hour, but this is where the height of concern tends to be, because you don't exactly know what's going to happen next, but was speeding up momentarily and now seems to be slowing down, considering how much traffic and, you know, pedestrians are sitting here on corners of many streets.
And we saw LAPD. I mean, they are following this pretty closely, but it is interesting to see this, you know, person be able to slow down as much as they have been in those intersections and not have LAPD, you know, try a pit maneuver. But again, this could be something they know more than we do right now about the potential danger of the person inside this car. So we're working to figure that out as well.
And obviously it gets a bit more crowded, and the dynamics of a pursuit change when you're on surface streets like this with traffic and people, pedestrians, multiple other vehicles, that sort of thing.
Harvard Heights now.
Right, so you know that LAPD is coordinating right now and keeping an eye on the situation, because in these scenarios, sometimes you do tend to see spike strips at some point or another. That seems to be the preferred method based on previous pursuits on surface streets, as opposed to pit maneuvers or freeways or something else. But right now it just seems like this car is slowly maneuvering through traffic. It's not getting to the, it's obviously already reckless, but not getting up to the recklessness of just speeding directly through intersections without regard for what traffic or people are coming through at any given moment.
And it's interesting. I mean, LAPD right there, so close behind. We've seen LAPD speed up and then at times almost give this person space to kind of maybe try to read what the next move is going to be. A lot of times we see these on surface streets, they stay in the area that they're most familiar with, so it can almost appear that they're, you know, going in circles. But this one, just picking this up now, seeing it travel through the Harvard Heights, Pico, Union area is what we saw earlier. So again, just an interesting dynamic with all of this traffic, almost bringing this car to a standstill.
Well, especially because normally, you know, when we see this much traffic in certain scenarios, and it's a Sunday afternoon, so you know that you have a lot of people out, and LA traffic, given as to what it is, it's already pretty crowded to begin with. So you see a lot of slithering back and forth in between these little divots and open spaces to try and get away. But there's really not much, you know, where other spots you can go. But going back to what we're used to, then you see these vehicles just sort of start making loops and turns within these neighborhoods and areas that they're familiar with, until inevitably LAPD or other law enforcement wraps it up. And when you say it doesn't end well, I'm bringing to light, or bringing to my memory, other previous examples where this looks eerily familiar, and then you know, somebody else is a victim of a rear end or a different type of crash, and that's what certainly heightens the fright factor, so to speak.
What's going to be interesting is if he gets on the freeway, and what time is it now? 5:45. I mean, obviously it's a Sunday afternoon, but people are still out. I mean, I can't imagine the freeway is going to be any easier as we see him drive through that middle turn lane as if it's its own lane, going through yet another intersection as those cars are stopped.
Yeah, and obviously right now going under a bridge and overpass, so always, and coming out the other end, it's you always hold your breath, right? Exactly.
They could be making a getaway, or at least trying to stop and potentially even carjack another vehicle.
And see right there, that's where it gets tricky, because you see that initial car move out of the way because they don't want any part of it, and then another one sort of whiz by, and it gets really, really dangerous. But no, it's still, I mean, just still moving forward. It hasn't, the vehicle here hasn't really exceeded, based on our initial views since when we broke in, about 40 to 50 miles an hour or so. It hasn't gotten to untold speeds.
And much of that is because of this traffic and just how many cars they're having to maneuver. It's kind of surprising that we haven't seen a side swipe or a fender bender or something of that nature for as long as they have been able to be on these streets and weave in and out of traffic, and you know, sometimes at times being in the opposite side of traffic, which we know can just be extremely dangerous at any time, but specifically when there's this many cars on the road.
We also know that obviously the more you know, brush up against those moments and avoid it, that's just another variable you're adding to the equation, and the likelihood of something like that happening and running into another vehicle or crashing into a fence or a gate or somewhere else does heighten if you just continually push the envelope in terms of luck. But there's no clear, you know, as Adam's normally, it's just not, there's no indication really based on how this car is driving right now, or specifically now in South LA, a specific direction to really indicate what exactly they're doing. Again, we don't really know if it's one or two people in the car or more. We haven't gotten any sort of up close look or anything. We just know so far, if you're just tuning in that LAPD is in pursuit of this white Camry that you're seeing, giving you a live look from SkyCal here, and that the driver or the want here in this particular case is assault with a deadly weapon. So those are the details we have confirmed so far.
Right.
Obviously working to pick up how this actually got started to begin with, or where it got started, and sort of map things out a little bit better.
Yeah, it was interesting there as we saw them take that route yet again in the turn lane. LAPD seems to be kind of mirroring their, what they're doing. They're getting in those turn lanes as well. You got to hope that people are paying attention. Obviously, this is not what you expect on a just, random Sunday afternoon. But this is where things get interesting because, yeah, I mean, these cars can only do so much. You can see some trying to get out of this guy's way, but LAPD right there on their tail. So we'll see if they get on the freeway at some point.
Far, I was going to say, we've only seen one cruiser so far, but you see a second. I thought I saw a third tailing back as well. And now this seems to be the 1, 2, 3. Yeah, we're counting 3, and then there's a 4th coming in on the back, and now a 5th. So very much, and then a 6 as well.
Another interesting point to note here. So we know that they are wanted for assault with a deadly weapon, but important for our viewers to know that, we still haven't figured out if LAPD knows that this person is still armed, if they maybe ditched that weapon or what, but this could still potentially be a very dangerous person that could have a weapon in this car, which is why maybe we're seeing, at least at some points in this chase, LAPD kind of give them a little bit of room, not right on their tail. Like
we've been told by law enforcement before that that's exactly right, that the dynamics change. If you know or don't know that a suspect has a weapon, that's why you're not going to see a lot of vehicles, a lot of law enforcement vehicles get right up close to the driver's side window or anything for risking, in order to risk an officer's safety. So they're more willing to let the driver, in this case, the suspect in this case, either tire themselves out, drive themselves out,
run out of gas,
and maybe run out of gas. Like, it becomes a bit of a waiting game to a certain extent, but there's a tricky balance to manage between obviously safety, and that's the priority for everybody else involved. When you have buses, you have other vehicles, you have pedestrians, and it seems like now it's
coming to a stop.
Coming to a stop here, almost as if it's abiding by traffic.
It does look like something is, you look at the back window there, Gio, I don't know if you can see this, but it almost looks like either something's been shot into or, thrown through. You got to wonder if, LAPD, and maybe I'm just seeing a reflection of something that looked like holes in the back of that white Camry. So maybe not from a different angle, but certainly as this moves through South LA, people need to be aware of the danger here.
I'm being told we also have retired Police Sergeant Patrick O'Malley on the line. I want to check in. Patrick, can you hear us okay?
Yes, I can.
First off, thank you so much for giving us a few minutes of your time this evening. What are you seeing so far, and what do you know, or what can you fill us in terms of the logistics of a situation like this that we're looking at right now?
Well, you both have touched on it a little bit. This is something that seems to be pretty serious. Assault with a deadly weapon. We don't know what the weapon is at this time, but by watching the pursuit so far and the fact that LAPD has all of these units involved, we can almost assume that it could be a gun with the way the vehicle looks, but it's clearly a very serious incident. And it appears, obviously, a felony is involved.
Patrick, we're watching now as he's getting on the freeway for at least the first time since we have seen, as we have dipped into coverage here. I mean, talk about the dynamics. Obviously, geography in Los Angeles for chases like this makes such a difference, but also time of day. I mean, it's almost 6 o'clock. Even though it's a Sunday, it's still busy. I mean, what right now changes as we watch this car now get on a freeway where we could see speeds, continue to increase here?
Well, and that's what's kind of concerning, and something that LAPD really takes into account is the people in the area, the pedestrians, the time of day, the traffic. They don't like to be involved in these pursuits unless they absolutely have to, and they like to just kind of put a helicopter up above it and follow it from there. But seeing this one, and with LAPD on it, and it looked like at one time they could have had as many as 7 units behind it. It looks like something that they will stay with now, and at this point they'll probably just notify CHP.
And I was going to jump on that point, perfectly segued by you, Patrick, is how does the dynamic of CHP get involved in terms of coordination, in terms of logistics, in terms of handoff? When do they start getting looped in, and how does that transition, so to speak, work if and when it does become a transition?
Well, most departments will notify CHP when they get onto the freeway, and then CHP will want to take over the pursuit completely or not at all. So in this case here, it looks like it has to be some type of very serious incident, possibly a shooting, and LAPD may want to stay with this. But knowing LAPD policy and how they work, I could still see them handing this off to CHP, and then CHP would take it over completely, and LAPD would back out.
I mean, we're watching right now, as you said, just so many of those units are now behind this car on a busy freeway. I mean, what is happening right now as LAPD is making the decision of, how to handle this when obviously they're thinking of other people's safety as well as, of course, those officers, and it being unpredictable of if this person, still has a weapon. What's going through the heads of these officers right now in making sure that they're safely continuing this down a busy freeway?
Well, and as you can see, most police pursuit policies indicate or dictate two patrol units and a supervisor. So you usually have about 3 units in a pursuit. So you can see in this pursuit, with as many as 7 or 8 units, it looked like, that they take into account how many people are in the car and the seriousness of the offense. So with all of these units involved, it's either due to the weapon that's in the car and it has already been used, or the number of people that are in the car. And both of those I have not heard any details of.
Right.
Understood. And I just want to make clear for our viewers at home, the reason right now, as you take a look at SkyCal Live, and it's getting a little foggy and we're very zoomed in and trying to play with our exposure there on the camera, is because we're coming up, or rather right on the edge of LAX airspace. Right. So we have the restriction there. And obviously, as that pursuit continues, if it keeps going in that direction, it might prove to be difficult for us unless it starts swinging back around. So obviously, if we have to vacate this area, or rather just come off of the pursuit for a bit in order to reestablish where they are, we'll continue to keep an eye on it. And then if it swings back around, we'll obviously put SkyCal right back on top. But this is why right now it seems a bit foggy, tricky to make out what exactly is going on. But just in case anybody is just tuning in right now, obviously we have retired Police Sergeant Patrick O'Malley on the line with us. But LAPD is in pursuit of a white Camry. That was a vehicle that was on screen a few minutes ago. The driver the suspect rather, wanted for assault with a deadly weapon, hence the seriousness of the situation and why at certain points we were seeing upwards of 5, 6, maybe 7 LAPD vehicles in pursuit of this car. We don't know if it's just one person in the vehicle or 2 people in the vehicle, but once again, we are nearing up on that LAX airspace restriction, so that's why it's so difficult to see. In terms of what happens next here, I mean, Patrick, we just get kind of in this loop of it seems like it's a waiting game, right? Or you're just there's a tricky balance between safety with regards to those on the roads that have nothing to do with this pursuit, safety of officers as well, but also trying to get this suspect apprehended as quickly as possible. How does that balance, how do you manage that balance in something like this, which is very, very serious, as you've pointed out before, but then also you have to manage everything else that comes with it?
Yeah, and that's the whole key, is adrenaline and stress. Between the watch commander at the station, the field sergeants that are trying to run the pursuit, and, second by second, they're evaluating what's going on, the crime that took place, locating the victims of the crime to make sure, they have the right car. All of those factors are taken into account to continue the pursuit, to hand off the pursuit, or notify other agencies or the other departments or jurisdictions within Los Angeles Police Department. So that's all going on right now, and then getting 1 or 2 possibly helicopters up above it, and it may be other agencies' helicopters that'll try to get up above it too. But right now, they're in that airspace that's going to make it hard for everybody.
Yep, and because of that, Patrick, we are going to go ahead and, come back with our viewers here on KCAL CBS Los Angeles Channel 2 when we are able to get back over that pursuit safely. Of course, you talked about that airspace. Just makes a huge difference in our ability to follow this pursuit. So while we do that, we are going to go ahead and just appreciate your time, appreciate your insight here. Is this, this is earlier. So looking at the right-hand side of your screen, if you're just now joining us, following that pursuit that started in Pico Union and is now heading into South Los Angeles.
So we'll keep tabs on this. We'll circle back. Patrick, thank you again for your time. We appreciate it. We'll circle back down the road.
Thank you.
News, LAPD in pursuit of a white Camry. SkyCal over that chase right now. For viewers who are just now joining us at the 6 o'clock hour, we were over this pursuit the last 20 minutes or so over on KCal 9. So to catch those up who have not been on top of this as much as we have been for you, there may be one, if not two people inside this car. We know that the want right now that officers are the reason why this pursuit has gotten started is that the suspect is wanted for assault with a deadly weapon. At one point, we saw upwards of 5, 6, if not 7 units behind this vehicle. Pursuit that started on surface streets in the Pico Union area. Now looks like we're on the freeway in the Inglewood area.
Yeah, 105.
Surface streets in the Pico Union area. Now looks like we're on the freeway in the Inglewood area.
Yeah, 105. I mean, we've watched this car when it was on those surface streets, Gio. He was, or they were, having no fear of driving on the opposite side of the street, no fear of driving through that turn lane, just very dangerous. And now we're seeing as they are in that carpool lane here on the 105 that they, you know, have obviously not slowed down and are not deterred with all of those LAPD officers. This has been going on, though, for quite some time. So you have to wonder, you know, if this person is running out of gas at some point. Of course, this car could go, you know, for who knows how long. But this has been something that we've been tracking now for at least 20 to 30 minutes. Yeah,
and who knows when exactly it started.
Exactly.
But since we jumped on it, yes, you're absolutely right. It's been about 30 minutes or so. At one point, we had to pause our coverage of the pursuit because we were in that LAX airspace restriction. It became so difficult to zoom out and maintain a steady eye on it that we sort of regrouped, reset, and now we're in a position here toward Westchester that now we are able to get back over it once again, and you see that white Camry there in the middle of your screen going 60 to 70 plus miles an hour. And we saw at least one unit more or less directly behind. I mean, we've sort of seen the established procedure here as we were talking to retired Police Sergeant Patrick O'Malley a few minutes ago. He was telling us that obviously the dynamic becomes that much more difficult when you're in this situation.
And it's, I mean, it's busy. Like we're looking right now at the freeway. I mean, this is not an empty freeway that this guy's driving on in the middle of the night. I mean, this is in the middle of, you know, 6 o'clock traffic on a Sunday where people have been out and about. And so you have to wonder, too, what is going through this guy's head? How desperate is he to get away? What will he do in order to weave in and out of that traffic so that LAPD does not have a chance to swoop in and do whatever they need to do to try to bring this to a safe end? But, you know, as we're looking at, you know, the cross streets here, Sepulveda Boulevard, the Westchester area, as Gio said earlier, but this started in Pico Union, and we've just seen this car not slow down, not be deterred at any point, as those officers seem to be staying pretty close. And, you know, we were wondering earlier if they were going to hand this off to CHP, as you said, that retired sergeant kind of weighing in what exactly happens they take it case by case scenario here, but it appears LAPD is wanting to stay with this one. I mean, Patrick, thanks for being here again. Talk to us, you know, this is something that obviously you were very familiar with in the days of you being a law enforcement officer. Talk to us about the process right now as we see this car, you know, really not be deterred in this pursuit.
Well, and as we talked about, you can see that LAPD has stayed with the pursuit, and they have all their units, their helicopter, at least one or two up above it. The problem is now it's probably going to head into the LAX area. So right now, all of LAX police and all of their security is being advised, you know, if it ends up in that exact area and runs into their parking lots or their garages or, you know, within the terminal to be ready for it. So they're notifying all the surrounding agencies and just continuing on with the pursuit.
Wow.
I was going to say, based off that, because this is now the second time we're coming up on that LAX airspace restriction, how much more difficult, or rather, does it even make it easier because of the amount of security, the amount of surveillance, everything else that is around that airspace and just the airport in general? Does it make communication easier or more difficult when it comes to a pursuit that is now entering into that area?
Well, the biggest problem is a lot of times you lose your air support or your immediate air support because they have to get clearance for everything. So in terms of the internal components of LAX, he doesn't have much of a chance in there because the ground units, and you saw how many, and there could be even more now. I saw more moving from the east and the west of where the pursuit is to get to the possible termination point. So everybody's notified, and you can tell there's probably at least 10 units in this pursuit now. So they're taking it very seriously. possibly armed, and they're going to treat it that way all the way until the end. The problem is if you get into a very populated area like the LAX terminals, it brings in a whole different set of factors in terms of the safety of everybody around if he was to run in there with a gun.
I mean, based on what you're seeing right here, I mean, it appears that, again, stopped at another red light, going to blow right through it. Obviously, LAPD, very close behind, is going to follow this guy. I mean, what is the MO right now for someone who, seems to have no fear, but is also not necessarily, waving a weapon or shooting at officers? But what are officers deciding on whether to put those spike strips down or do a pit maneuver, especially when we see those red lights? At least bring him to a slow, stall, if not a complete stop. What makes that decision of, okay, now's the time to try to bring this guy in?
Well, if he's armed, the spike strips could possibly be used, but more than likely they don't want any officers or any civilians, within eyesight to the front of the vehicle. So once you involve a pit maneuver with an armed suspect, they end up facing directly at you, and that's the last thing you want. So a pit maneuver, if this is an armed individual that did a shooting already, that they're not going to be utilizing that maneuver. So they'll probably at this point be riding it out and have a whole bunch of units in the area, when it comes to an end.
Yeah, because at this point now, just basing it off of the part one, part two, so to speak, situation of this, once again, just a reminder for viewers, it looks like we're right up on that restriction. So this is why sometimes you'll see a clear view of the vehicle and other times not, just because we
can only go so far.
Exactly, and it just becomes that much more difficult to have a handle on the situation. But this has happened before, and then we were able to reset. And that brings me to sort of my next observation / question is that in the part one of this pursuit, when we first broke in, we were seeing surface streets, we were seeing, and there's some video from earlier, just going through intersections, traffic, speeds no more than 40 to 45 miles an hour. And now the dynamics have changed to the point of being on the freeway. And Patrick, it goes to your point where here, I mean, is it just a waiting game? Is that really what it is? And just hoping that the suspect or suspects either make a mistake on their own, especially because of that number one variable of assault with a deadly weapon, that you just don't want to risk that at all in any scenario?
Yeah, that's pretty much it. They're doing a lot of investigative work behind the scenes because if the car isn't stolen, they possibly know who it is. They possibly know where the vehicle comes back to. They possibly know where the suspect lives. So that's all things that are being worked on behind the scenes and getting units into certain areas if he's heading in the direction of those addresses, or just working on the termination of this part of the pursuit. But I have not heard any more details on the specifics of if it was actually a shooting or where it started at, but just by the number of units really says a lot about the seriousness of the crime that occurred and how serious LAPD is taking this.
We haven't been able to confirm either if there's one or two people inside that vehicle, but we were hearing potentially there's two. I mean, what dynamic changes when you're talking about somebody that could be in that passenger seat, either, making calls, we've seen some in crazy situations where they've had people, set up and ready to go, a getaway car, so to speak, where they pull into one of those overpasses or under one of those overpasses and are able to kind of get into another vehicle, whether that's a carjacking or something like prearranged or planned. How does that dynamic change, though, from there just being one person in the vehicle versus two?
Well, and the other thing, we have a lot of stolen vehicle pursuits, and the main focus of a stolen vehicle is just the driver. They want to try to identify other people, but most of the time, in terms of the crime that's going to be filed, it's going to be the driver. So when you have a shooting that's involving a vehicle and you have multiple people, the focus is everybody in the vehicle. So that's why there's so many units behind it. That's why they are following it and taking it so seriously, is because they would like to get everybody in the vehicle in custody. So, and they probably don't know if there's more than two or how many are in there unless they saw them get into the car. It looks like it has dark tinted windows. So, that's where they're just taking into account the safety of everybody in the area, the safety of the public, and the safety of the officers that are directly behind it.
Yeah, we haven't been able to get a clear view right now as going under a couple overpasses here as we loop back around. Still in the Westchester area, so we haven't really left this in the last few minutes or so. But to Patrick's point, we haven't seen a clear view because of those tinted windows of how many people are exactly in the vehicle. We just know that it could be 2, could be 1, but obviously assault with a deadly weapon being the #1 want. And here you go. Now you're bowling over the 80-mile-an-hour mark, and it seems like, not that they see this as a getaway, but now just sort of speeding up. So, Patrick, I guess my next question for you would be, because you mentioned this earlier as to, when that transition, if a transition even happens between LAPD or CHP, is there any particular reason why or why not CHP would want to take over a particular pursuit or would not want to take over a particular one, or is it really just a case-by-case basis?
CHP is always ready to take over a pursuit.
Okay.
It's just that they want the entire pursuit. They don't want LAPD units mixed in the middle. It comes down to communication issues, tactical issues, training issues. So if they get the word the LAPD wants to hand it off to them, they'll be ready. But in some situations like this one, the seriousness of the crime, the availability of the LAPD units, the familiarity with the area, it's clear that LAPD wants to keep their hands on this one and handle it from start to finish.
Talk to us about where we're heading right now. The exit, it looks like in Westchester to Norwalk, now going east on the 105. I mean, what right now at this time of day, 6:11, on a Sunday where it's not an empty street here. I mean, you've been in the decision-making, seat where there's a lot of things happening, as you said, behind the scenes. But talk us through some of those questions that they're asking themselves right now as we see this car reach upwards of 85 to almost 90 miles an hour. What decisions are having to be made right now as we sit on this and see this continue to stretch on?
Well, as you can see, the best place for this pursuit, or a lot of pursuits to be, is on the freeway. You're not dealing with red lights. You're not dealing with pedestrians. You're dealing with your just normal flow of traffic and not a heavy amount of traffic. So this is a perfect place for them to have the pursuit, and they would love to keep it here. It's when it gets off on the side streets and you start dealing with all those other elements where the decisions are made to either continue the pursuit or cancel the pursuit or just follow it from the air.
Yeah, and right now it seems to have slowed down a little bit. And a lot of the times when we're seeing the slowdown, it's really just because of traffic. Yeah. It's just because we've been drawing attention to the fact for 30 plus, almost 40 minutes now that it really is just, it's crowded, right? It's on a Sunday night and, you're going to have people out and about. But it does make it easier, obviously, on a highway when you have just an untouched stretch of road and you don't have to worry about pedestrians or potentially slamming into stopped cars that are waiting at a red light, because we've certainly seen that before. But right now, just based on the immediate, it's just been consistent so far. You have the vehicle coming up on some pretty bumpy traffic here, just briefly, and at least 2 units behind. We know we've seen many more behind those 2 as well. So this just turns into a bit of a wait and see approach as we're in the North Hawthorne area, still going east on the 105. There doesn't seem to be anything else that draws attention to any other type of any change necessarily to the procedure here. It's been rather consistent this entire time.
Well, it's interesting too, because we come into a moment like this, Patrick, as we're watching traffic crawl here. I mean, are they just going to sit there and let this guy kind of weave his way through? I mean, this is fascinating to watch. This is probably the slowest we've seen it, at least on a freeway here. Definitely. And it's going to be interesting if this guy has nowhere to go. You can see, okay, we're zooming in. The window was just rolled down. That person in the passenger seat, unclear, why they rolled the window down. But this is the closest picture we've gotten of actually seeing that it does appear there's somebody in the passenger seat of this car there in that yellow shirt. Yeah,
so we can see, we know for a fact it's at least two. Right? Because there's a driver, and then now having seen the passenger side window roll down and someone in that seat as well. So we know there's at least 2. Once again, to catch anybody up as we're approaching 6:15 here, on CBS Channel 2. And in case you haven't seen the beginning of our breaking news coverage on this pursuit, LAPD continues to be behind this white Camry that's in the middle of your screen. Obviously, we have SkyCal overhead. We have had to pause a couple of times because of LAX airspace restriction, but that not really a concern at the moment, though it now looks like it's back on the 105 West. So it looks like kind of turning back around to the direction that we started on.
Back in Inglewood, too. We've seen him cross through Inglewood
we know that
before.
the suspect is wanted for assault with a deadly weapon. So that is the main, we have confirmed that detail, and that is obviously what is defining this pursuit so far, because a lot of the questions that you tend to ask, including ourselves, is that why not use spike strips, why not use a pit maneuver? But as Patrick O'Malley has told us, retired police sergeant, that is a complicating factor because safety has to be the priority for officers and for everybody else on the road, and the last thing you want is to come face to face with someone who may have a gun or something else in that scenario. But Hunter, to your point, this is right now the slowest as it starts slowly picking up speed again, right? Because traffic now becomes the other variable in this pursuit as well.
And it's the unpredictability here, Patrick. I gotta imagine this guy has, you know, for the most part, no fender benders, no side swipes. We saw him on surface streets to start this pursuit in the Pico Union area when it first got started before it moved to the freeway. But for the most part, it does appear like this guy is not necessarily being reckless in the sense of, you know, crashing into cars or anything like that, but still reckless in the sense that they have continued to try to get away. It does not appear that they are going to be surrendering or letting up, at least, you know, of their own accord, maybe run out of gas or accidentally crash. But I mean, how common is it to see pursuits like this at this time of day in this location moving again along Van Ness Avenue? I mean, how common is it to see these pursuits last this long with LAPD still what appears to be the lead on this investigation?
Well, so far it just seems like the suspects are going with whatever flow of traffic they come into.
Right.
So they speed up when there's not as much traffic. When there's traffic, they kind of just slow it down and go along with the pace of traffic. LAPD isn't putting a lot of pressure on the suspect vehicle. You can see that usually the first unit is a little distance back. So, you know, they are keeping in mind the safety of the public. Hopefully that by not getting right up on his bumper, they're giving him maybe a little bit of room to not have to speed so much or drive so recklessly. So, yeah, right now they're just going to ride this one out, and, you know, hopefully that he keeps going until he runs out of gas. Or, as you said, he's kind of heading back to the original place where it started. So he might try to get to a familiar area where some friends are. You know, they can try to bail from the car. But for now, that's what LAPD is just going to ride it out, and hopefully it ends safely.
Yeah, right now, as we continue to keep an eye on this, it looks like going east on the 105 in Inglewood, but Inglewood has been one of the, you know, right in that immediate area. It's been Inglewood, it's been Hawthorne, it's been Westchester, so you're not going around too much, hence why we've also had to pause a couple of times with the LAX airspace restriction, considering that that's where the airport's right there as well. This started up a little bit in the Pico Union area on those surface streets about 40 plus minutes ago or so, and now we've been sort of hanging around here in this particular region now in South LA. So you're right, it starts turning into a situation where, like many other pursuits, you start buying time for yourself if you're the suspect and try to find areas that you're familiar with. I'd be curious to see, and Patrick, I'm curious if this is something that is attributable to past pursuits as well, where often you'll see them, as you pointed out, going back to familiar areas on those surface streets, jump on the freeway and just try to ride it out. Is there any chance here that you could see them try to get back on a surface street and then try to, you know, maybe call a buddy or bail out in some direction? Because right now we're seeing some traffic try to slow them down. Because I bring that up only because it's so rare that patience lasts that long for suspects. At some point, impatience we tend to see starts breaking through sooner or later.
Yeah, and, you know, like we've touched on, I think he's heading now back to the exact area that he came from. I think we were on the 110 before when we had to go around the airspace. So it'll be interesting to see if he ends up right back in the Pico Union area or what happens. But these areas where there's a lot of traffic and stop traffic is where it gets a little bit stressful because he can, you know, there's a lot of civilians around, innocent people around, and then you have the police that can't really get in a big block behind him. They just have the single unit that's right behind the suspect. So these are the times that get a little bit more stressful for everybody.
Well, and earlier, we were seeing that window roll down, potentially that passenger throwing something outside of the vehicle. But I think it's important for people to note here, as we look at the left-hand side of the screen where that car is almost coming to a stop. It's like, of course, everybody's watching this thinking, why aren't they ramming his car? Why aren't they doing something dramatic or drastic as they get out of their cars? Step us through, though, what right now is happening, Patrick, as this officer is kind of moving with that vehicle of this guy could be armed. So they're not going to make any rash decisions here and potentially kind of put this guy in a corner, so to speak, to do something dramatic.
No, and that's why they want the car facing the exact direction that it's facing, away from them. So, in this situation, the problem is that all of the innocent people that are in front of this car, if, the officers were to have to open fire on an armed suspect or two suspects. So the decisions are being made by the suspect, and as you can see, when they just keep going real slow, the officers just don't know what that next move is. So they want to keep a little bit of distance, and they want to use the cover of their police vehicles for whatever happens next.
Yeah, there's a number of LAPD vehicles and units directly behind this car. It looked like earlier someone was throwing something out of either the passenger or the driver's side. It was a little hard to tell. But right now you see sort of the parting of the Red Sea with the amount of traffic that is, trying to avoid this particular area. You see the video from earlier on the right side of your screen. Left side, you see that number of police units directly behind trying to make its way toward that suspect. I mean, obviously LAPD has been on top of this since we broke in, since we were bringing this breaking news to you. But these are the complicating factors right now because you have so much traffic. You have this X number of police vehicles and the one suspect wanted for assault with a deadly weapon. It just makes it that much more complicated, that much more dangerous. There was that brief moment too, just a couple of minutes ago, where you saw the car almost at a complete stop. And then that first police unit open its passenger side door almost to say, all right, like this might be the start of the end. And then all of a sudden you just start inching forward. But this car, I think inching is still probably appropriate because it doesn't seem to really be gaining steam. And I say that knowing they could at any given moment. But right now it's still going rather slow. And a lot of it, I think, has to do with that traffic.
It's interesting, too, to see LAPD be so cautious right now, as that car is being cautious as well. I mean, not ramming his way through it, not trying to drive on the far right-hand shoulder, as we saw at some points when he was on the surface-level streets. We saw him go into the opposite lane of traffic, and now he's using his blinker. I mean, it's just fascinating to kind of see the change in behavior, while also this guy being this person, so consistent throughout this 40-plus minute pursuit. I mean, he really hasn't changed his tactic. He's, as you said earlier, Patrick, going with the flow of traffic. But this is a pretty big backup right here. And as people hear those lights and see those sirens behind them, they're going to try to get out of the way as much as possible. But that's kind of what's leading to this slow but steady, forward progress for this guy. But they just do not want to pressure him into doing anything crazy or making any rash decisions that, as you said, could put innocent lives in danger, because we're looking at a lot of innocent lives right here.
Yeah, and you're really noticing, obviously, every regular driver are the cars that are moving over to the shoulder and moving out of the way. And then everybody in front is now just realizing, oh, wait, there's something going on behind. And it's rather serious because you see that many number of lights. And Patrick, that's a question I want to ask you, because I was thinking about it as we sort of zoomed out a bit and showed it was 1, 2, 3, 7, 8 plus LAPD units behind. Is that really just to grab the attention on top of having a strong number of officers on hand in case something happens, or is there a different reason for having that number of vehicles directly behind each other, so to speak, like a long snake in pursuit of a suspect?
Yeah, Gio, that's, strictly for officer safety. It's not for show. It's not for anything else. It's, like I had said earlier, it's 2 units and a supervisor that are usually in a pursuit per most police policies. You can ask for additional units based on the circumstances. And in this circumstance, I think they had just done a shooting. There's multiple people inside the vehicle, and they're, staying in the general area, which is mostly LAPD's jurisdiction. So when this does come to an end, you probably have 1 or 2, at least maybe 2 helicopters up above also for one to follow each person. And you have the 10 units, and you may have 2 people in each of those units also. So, you could have as many as 20 officers that are directly behind it, and then you have all of the other officers that are on the side streets or in that area in case they get out and run. So they're taking this very seriously right now, and you can just tell that by the number of units. And it's all about the officer's safety and the safety of all those vehicles that are around and in front of the suspect vehicle.
And obviously in this situation, right, we can't see the crystal ball of what this guy is going to do next. But I'm curious, is he or are those officers waiting to see what he is going to do in a sense of them not maybe instigating anything, but just going to sit back, follow this guy for as long as they can and just wait to see what he does? Is that what's happening here as we, like you said, see that long snake of vehicles, which is for those officers' protection?
Yeah, that's it. They're just going to follow this and let the suspect and suspects make the next move. And as you had mentioned earlier, Gio had mentioned earlier, when the doors open on the vehicle, I mean, they want to have the first tactical advantage when this comes to a stop. And they are ready. They have, they'll have their weapons out and, ready for whatever move the suspect makes next. And that's what they're going to be waiting for. And, as the traffic gets bunched up and it slows down, it just puts more people in danger, and that's just not what they want right now.
Yeah, right now you see the suspect's vehicle using that blinker again. I don't know if it's just left on for leaving on sake or otherwise, you sense the steam sort of running out a little bit on this one, and I think the traffic is the biggest factor to play around with right now, because we're still on the 110, we're going north. In the South LA area, and there's just nothing really, there's nowhere for this suspect to go, really. We have yet to see any attempt to get off on an exit or otherwise try to get back on a surface street or even try to loop back around. It's just, it's as if the suspect's vehicle is just part of the regular traffic.
Well, and it's like he knows that the ball's in his court almost, so to speak, that he's going to continue to kind of run the show, so to speak, for as long as he can until he's forced to make a decision here.
Yeah, and I'm curious as to what, what the game
what the
plan...
best case scenario would be for him. I mean, what is at some point he's got to realize that he's got a lot of officers here, but he also knows that they're treating this as a very serious situation.
Well, normally I would say that. And Patrick, I want to rope you in on this one as well. Normally, I would say that this is a slam dunk, but obviously in 99% of circumstances it might be. But, we've seen situations where something like this happens and then you keep waiting it out, and then a suspect finds an overpass or, manages to get in a getaway car, and then we just kind of lose sight of the suspect. Is there any sort of length when it comes to, like, when we're in this particular situation? Does it typically last a few more minutes, upwards of an hour to 2 hours? Based on your experience, what does something like this look like at the point which we are at right now?
Well, the difference in the pursuits that you talk about is those pursuits don't usually have 10 police units directly behind it.
Fair point,
Yeah, so, and it's the seriousness of the crime that is involved in this one. And, for this one to get away, it would be very odd, because like you've seen in a lot of our pursuits lately, they go into parking structures, they go into, LAX airspace, whatever it is. You have a couple of units, they're driving really fast. It's hard to keep up with them, but due to the seriousness of the crime in this one, what looks like it was a prior shooting, this guy's odds of getting away are slim and none at this point. I'm sure that with the helicopters up above, and like we had talked about, they're just going to ride it out. You got to remember that they can rotate officers from the different areas into this pursuit, full tanks of gas. The adrenaline settles down and everybody is just ready to go at all times. So CHP, I'm sure, has been notified. I'm sure they're standing by watching their traffic on their freeways, blocking some of the on-ramps and kind of helping on the side. But yeah, they will just ride this out until the person runs out of gas or jumps out of the car. And
as we approach 6:30 here in just a couple of minutes, we want to remind our viewers here that if you're just now joining us, sometimes we get into space that we're just not restricted to fly because of LAX or for other reasons. So while right now we can see those lights in the middle of your screen there on the left-hand side, we've got to stay in a safe space where we're not getting in the way of other air traffic. But as you mentioned, Patrick, this is just going to be what appears now a waiting game, but also depends on the traffic. I mean, this guy is following the flow of traffic, not trying to go fast when he can't, when it's a parking lot, but picking up speeds when he has the brakes to be able to do so. So, I mean, it's just a fascinating thing to watch as we approach 45 minutes to an hour following this pursuit, that they are really taking this seriously and must know, that this person is very dangerous if they are not going to make any drastic decisions of pit maneuvers or spike strips and, force this guy's hand.
And it does feel like that is the, as Patrick has mentioned multiple times now, that is the one reason why something like that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
It's just because you don't want to take that risk, and the safest avenue here is just letting them draw this out and decide when, okay, fine, it's time to pull over. Because there's nothing else they can really do.
Yeah.
Right now, looking at still on the left side of your screen, we're keeping an eye on it from a distance, almost sort of parallel to what's going on, because again, that airspace restriction that Hunter mentioned. So it doesn't look like we have a clear view at this exact moment, but the video from earlier of what you're seeing on the right side of your screen when the car was in Inglewood, that was almost copy and paste to what we've been seeing for close to an hour at this point, ever since the pursuit started right in the Pico Union area. And it's worth repeating all of this for our viewers here in case you're just joining us now at the half-hour mark of 6 o'clock on this Sunday evening. But there on the left side of your screen is the live footage from SkyCal of this pursuit as it continues from LAPD. On the right side is from earlier, but that is more or less what you've been seeing now for close to an hour. The want here is assault with a deadly weapon, so that is really what's coloring this entire pursuit as it continues to go on.
Patrick, I talked to you a couple of weeks ago. We had a pursuit with a battering ram. It was a big rig truck. So obviously a very different situation. Obviously this car is able to go a whole lot faster than a big rig. But I asked you about the percentage of criminals that are going on these pursuits that are getting away. It feels like they're either getting more creative or they're learning more evasive techniques to be able to avoid getting caught. But you said something interesting, that you didn't feel like maybe that was the case. Talk to me about just the level of what we're seeing lately with people who are successfully able to draw this out in enough time that they eventually get away. Are we seeing more of that? Or do you think maybe we just, are seeing more creative getaways?
Well, like we had discussed, I think we're seeing less of it because we have district attorneys that are actually filing charges and filing felonies. Some of these criminals realize that they're now being punished for the crimes they're committing. So the police are also evaluating that, whereas before it might be it may have been a felony before, but now it's being filed as a misdemeanor. So what is the worth to the public and the danger of the public to keep chasing them? So they give them the distance, they pull the units off, they try to follow by air, and then some of them get away. But the crime that they are involved in usually isn't anything super serious. So as you can see in this one, this is the biggest difference. You have a serious crime, you have a felony or multiple felonies, and they're taking it very seriously, and they want to take both of these people into custody.
And right now we're still keeping an eye on this. It is another sort of slowdown portion of this pursuit right now.
I thought for a second he was exiting, but it does appear he's staying on the 110 North near the San Bernardino or West Adams Boulevard and Figueroa Way exit there. This in Central City. But, I mean, we've seen this guy going in and out of various freeways, but it started on side streets. This started on surface level, streets, and he was going into opposite lanes of traffic, running through intersections, running through red lights. But as far as him being on the freeway, we haven't seen that same type of erratic behavior as we were seeing maybe earlier when this was just starting.
No, it's just been a very consistent, and here kind of veering very briefly on the shoulder. But there's the long line of LAPD vehicles directly behind. So it's been consistent in terms of its pursuit. It's been consistent in terms of the suspect driving the way that person has been driving for at least half an hour or so right now. Still waiting to see if there's any point where they might veer off on an exit here and get back on surface streets. It feels like we've been teasing up on that line a couple of times, but instead it looks like maybe they're getting on the 10, but we'll see. Just keep an eye on it. But overall, it's there. You wouldn't think, if not for the long line of police vehicles directly behind, that this would be any other car in the midst of Sunday night LA traffic. That's basically what's been going on here for a bit. But we know that there's at least 2 people in the car. That was the other added detail that we learned when we saw the window roll down and maybe something getting thrown out.
I mean, was it a piece of string? Was it a balloon? I mean, trying to figure that out when this is just such a weirdly drawn out situation is also tricky, because it just isn't clear what exactly that passenger threw out of the vehicle. But certainly they did throw something out. Yeah,
it looks like we're on the 10 going east now. But once again, nothing. It's just it's traffic sort of getting back and forth, or rather, getting back and forth in his way or their way. That's when we see the slowdowns. The earlier footage from earlier
there's that,
is the window rolling down
here.
there,
like a string of. I mean, it's just bizarre.
Yeah. But that was our moment to confirm
that there was another
person in the vehicle. Otherwise, that's the most information we've gotten out of who/what is in the vehicle right now.
Patrick, reiterate though the danger. Assault with a deadly weapon is what this person's accused of, potentially a shooting that happened before this. But for those viewers who are just now joining us and are asking themselves, why in the world is this stretching on as long as it is? Why haven't they done something dramatic? Refresh us once again. Re-explain why it's so important for these officers to take it so safely and carefully.
Well, time is on their hands. I mean, it would be just ideal if the person happened to run out of gas, right here on the freeway, where they can have plenty of room to keep people away, plenty of room for them to get behind their cars and use them as cover. So they just want to keep this going and try to end it on their terms, if it ends in a certain area where there's not a lot of civilians. So there's just no benefit to a pit maneuver right now. It could anger them or cause them to do something that they don't intend on doing. So they just want to let this ride out, and hopefully they pull over or jump out of the car at some point coming up. But I mean, we're now turning into certain areas or the general areas of where this could have all started or where they could reside. So it'll be interesting to see if we start to see, different officers in the areas based on the registered owner or who they may know is in the vehicle already.
Yeah, this is the latest really fresh development of the pursuit, because we've been going on for so long on the highway and on the freeways and just seeing a sort of prolonged amount of consistent driving, for lack of a better word. So now this is the first time being back on surface streets in close to an hour. So right now, this is what heightens the fear, the concern, because you have all of these cars either parked or in the road. Like this right there is what's concerning, because we've seen a number of rear endings happen, smashing into a light pole or fences or walls. Any of that could happen, and that's what gets you a bit nervous as you get into this particular situation. It still looks like the suspect keeps using their blinkers too. That's the other interesting thing about this. But now this is the closest to a complete stop before then, continuing on, and we're just going to keep on going here through all these intersections. But yeah, you wonder if there's a sense of familiarity with this particular neighborhood.
It appears now, driving through, a part of town that is what looks like a homeless encampment. That's going to certainly heighten the risk of pedestrians being around. Patrick, you were telling us earlier that, the best case scenario for a pursuit like this is that it stays on the freeway and it stays in a position where there isn't people maybe at risk. But as we see this snake through Central City, South Broadway, and West 24th Street, this is dangerous. This is where people, cars, if there is a confrontation, I mean, somebody right there getting something out of the back of his car. Oh, and he's running now. We see that suspect running away with a sweatshirt on.
Passenger side door?
Yeah, it appears. So did he ditch the vehicle, and is that driver still in the vehicle, and is the passenger now running?
Yeah, it looks like officers are getting after one person, potentially one person in the car, probably pulling them out, just taking a look. It's hard to get over these sort of shipping containers, and it looks like, they got one person. Pulled him out of the driver's side, and then the passenger is still on the run. But you did see sort of the tops of heads of a few officers sprint down this sidewalk, so they are no doubt in pursuit of that other person on foot, wherever they may have run off to. But it looks like officers have detained and the driver of that vehicle, got him into custody.
And this is something right now time is of the essence. Patrick, step us through what's happening with the officers that were in the area that are trying now to locate that passenger that jumped out of that car. It almost looked like both of them jumped out because the car was kind of like swerving in the street.
Veering a little bit, yeah.
That's sometimes when they just ditch the vehicle and it's still in drive. But Patrick, talk about time right now. How quickly do they need to get that passenger, arrested and in custody?
Yeah, that was interesting because it almost looked like there was no driver for a little bit, and then they had run up to the car, and kind of unknown what happened in the first contact there, but the driver appears to be okay, and he's in custody. Now you have the helicopter up above, and you had all those other units that were behind, and they're going to start to form a perimeter to make sure that they can keep the other suspect within the perimeter. And then they will start, a grid search and call in the canines or whatever else they need to do. But in this case, with the assault with a deadly weapon, they're really going to focus and want to take the passenger into custody if they haven't already taken him into custody.
All right, we're watching it again now on the right-hand side of your screen. If you can see the guy's head as he kind of gets out of frame, because obviously we wanted to stay there on the car as well. But there were officers, Gio said, right there.
At least a couple walking
trying
down the
to get there,
sidewalk.
but he got at least 30 seconds of a head start.
Yeah, and looking at it, you see this collection of vehicles, like they look like they're just parked here. That might have been what the final straw was.
Sure.
In terms of, there's no more space here, right? You
go.
finally cornered yourself into a situation where now the vehicle may, and again, we're sort of speculating at this point as to what exactly the conversation was between the two, because you just see the passenger side door open and then that passenger sprint out. And because all three of us thought that the driver might have jumped out as well, but it turns out it didn't seem like they did, because officers were able to get that person into custody rather quickly. I mean, they approached things cautiously and then managed to drag that person out, put them to the ground, and then get them into custody fairly quickly. So now it becomes, okay, you have one down. Now it's a matter of where the other one is. So it's kind of hard to tell, but all of a sudden you just see a lot more people out and about, given everything that's gone on in just the last few minutes.
I mean, you got to wonder, too, we joined this when it was in Pico Union. We saw maybe some circling back into some of the areas, Inglewood, Westchester area, that this guy maybe was familiar with where he is right now and knew where to run or knew somebody who he could hide with. But it's just so fascinating as we watch the replay of that there on the right. I mean, that guy just took off. And you got to wonder if he knew somebody in the area and could have potentially gotten into another car. And long gone.
And you see them, so like you see the officers cautiously get in there. You open the front door, the driver's side door, and you wonder, oh wait, is there someone in there? Yes, there is. They took them out and got them down pretty quickly. But you're right, because these areas are not too far from each other, right? The central part of this pursuit, the meat of it, was going into so many different directions, only to inevitably swing back to a neighborhood that's not that far from where we initially started.
Well, and we just got some word here that both suspects are in custody. We're hearing that through radio traffic, so of course we still need to get some last confirmation on it. But I mean, that is some good news there, because a lot of times if you see, them being in areas they're familiar with, there's places for them to run. As we're looking at, another crowded sidewalk here, of course, with all the commotion of all the number of police vehicles.
Well, I mean, it's a number of people now too.
What
I mean, you look at all this. It's not just police vehicles. You see all these cars and traffic. I'm actually wondering how much of this is traffic versus something else.
Patrick, are you hearing anything about if there was maybe a gathering already in the area happening before this all happened, or are these looky-loos that just saw the line of cars?
I think if you looked, I think it might have been some type of car show.
Yeah, I saw the LA Dodger
older
car, right?
And whatever else is going, maybe some type of DJ thing or concert, because you can just see all the people instantly. So this creates a whole nother problem. But the good thing is that the suspects are in custody, and now LAPD just needs to deal with the crowds, because you know how it happens when these crowds gather like this. Everybody wants to feed off the emotions or assume something else is going on. But they'll start to form skirmish lines, protect all their equipment, protect the people, and then try to get out of there as soon as they can.
Yeah, it sort of evolved into now a sort of a completely separate situation right now, because obviously it's easy for us to see what's going on, and you have the bird's eye view. But if you're on a street corner, if you're at the show or doing something else, and you just see a wall of officers show up, and you see helicopters overhead, you're going to have a lot of questions as to what's going on. So it looks like officers are still perhaps looking through that vehicle. That's the white Camry that we were keeping an eye on the entire time. So ultimately, just as a refresher, you know, it's worth going through the details one more time. When we first broke in, we were getting word of a LAPD pursuit of this white Camry that you see on your screen. The driver, rather the suspect, wanted for assault with a deadly weapon. At the time, we didn't know if there was more than one person in the car. Eventually, we were able to confirm, just based on what we were seeing, that there were 2 people in the vehicle. And after starting in Pico Union on surface streets, eventually we were getting on the freeways and going through Inglewood, through Westchester, having to pause a couple of times because of LAX airspace restriction, before then inevitably spending a lot of time on the freeway.
I mean, 30, 45 minutes, it felt longer, but that guy just going with the flow of traffic and knowing that LAPD was going to be super cautious. He didn't make any moves. They didn't make any moves until he got on those surface streets.
And then eventually ending here in the Central City neighborhood and stopping in a sort of a crowd of people, or rather there's a large crowd in nearby areas. Passenger jumps out of the passenger side door, takes off, eventually taken into custody. The driver, there you see the video on the right side of your screen, was taken into custody rather quickly after this initial moment from the passenger. So all seems to be relatively under control right now. Obviously then, as Patrick mentioned, it becomes a sort of part 3 to this entire situation, which is now public safety and a number and crowd control and everything else that comes into play here right now with everything that's going on.
And you got to imagine, I mean, the car that we're looking at right here is that one that just, you know, took us on the pursuit. That becomes now evidence. They're going to search this. They're going to look for that weapon potentially if there ever was one, or if they've got more in the car. But what's happening right now, they're going to get that car, I'm sure, hauled away to where they can do more investigative work, Patrick. But this now becomes just a situation where they're trying to figure out, I'm sure, you know, what happens next? What happens next here?
Well, yeah, and as you can see, they're rushing around because they want to get out of the area. There's just too many people around, too much at stake. So that's an officer that's driving the car away. Usually you would wait for a tow truck and then, you know, bring it to a tow yard and recover the vehicle. But right now they just want to get the vehicle out of the area. They want to get the suspects back, you know, in the cars and off to jail, and they want to get all of the LAPD officers out of that area. So that's what they're working on now, and you can see them starting to move different vehicles around and to clear the area.
That's important context. No, thank you for that.
Yeah, because that's something, I mean, we see the trucks that come in, and it can take, you know, sometimes hours to get these cars hauled away into evidence, but it's obvious that there's something important about this this vehicle, and I'm sure the nature of the number of people in the area, that they just want to make sure they preserve as much as they can when it comes to that vehicle.
And ultimately, it doesn't, the good news here as well, it doesn't seem like any officers or any people were hurt, despite a lot of close calls
a miracle,
at certain times.
This took a long time
we'll continue to monitor the cleanup of this situation as it continues here, this LAPD pursuit coming to an end. So as we learn more, we'll be sure to keep you posted here on KCAL News, on air and online at our website as well at kcalnews.com.
Yeah, Patrick, thanks so much for your time tonight.
Thank you.
And stay with us. We'll be right back.